If
Awesome.
I do have a real IT issue, I have to hide it because I don't want to embarrass myself.
Ah. Of course, too. There's the. Yeah, I'm curious as to why it made a Teams link. That's.
Mm.
We'll go ahead and clean that one up in post.
Yeah.
Clean it in post.
That's the beauty of this is I have Premiere and I can control how I look. I do like how they have a soft focus on Teams though. Like it really made me look smooth. It was great.
I know it's Louis there bought an upgraded camera and he is like crystal clear.
Oof.
And the first time he saw himself on one of our Teams meeting, he went, "Whoa!" And I was like, "Dude, you bought the new camera." So
Yeah, you gotta go for the old '80s like Vaseline on the lens look.
Oh, perfect. But I'm gonna go ahead and get started here. But welcome everyone. Today we're talking about one click away from disaster. How much damage can someone actually do to a business by clicking one of those links that's in a phishing email? And I wanted to go over today this partnership that we've started working with a company called Galactic Advisors because we wanted to better test our security settings inside because from my time at the NRC, hence why I always have the NRC mug to remind me, I always love the phrase trust but verify. And a big part of that is checking your work. And I firmly believe that it is very difficult to check your own work. It's good to check your own work, but a second pair of eyes, an impartial pair of eyes is always super important. So we're going to review a sample report from one of their pen tests, which is performed by generating a link, sending it out to someone via normal email, and seeing what happens when you click that link and go through the process of what they're able to get a hold of. And mainly kind of jumping into this report here on the screen share, they play zone, similar to a lot of other things I've talked about of looking at the different zones in IT. And they specifically look at a couple different things, backups, what accounts they can get access to, a Microsoft 365 environment, patches on the machines, the AV setup, the firewall. Are you educating users? How are the machines encrypted, and other surveillance pieces? And over here, it has the companies with just the codes based on the scan that's being run. And these are done by a bunch of different sample companies to try and give an appropriate overview. So this is an especially bad report across a number of companies. And again, it's because it's a sample company and it's supposed to show you the breadth of what you can find. So they're left as ID codes, mainly for discretion too. So that way, if somebody, this is also the case on the real reports. And it's again, to try and keep as much discretion as possible. And when you have the zone and the different risk breakdown, they do it red, yellow, green to quickly go over it. And there's two zones that they don't really talk about, which is the backups and the education, because those are usually handled by answers from the company themselves. Like, how often are you backing something up? What data do you have? How often are you, educating your users? So those aren't really something that's tested by the link. It's more tested by answering different questions. So the method for this type of test, I really like the way that they've set it up, because I've seen a lot of scanning tools will say, well, you got to import this tool, you got to export it, you got to okay this. They've done a really good job of saying, let's make it run the same way an attacker does so that it is as close to reality as possible. So the methodology is you click a link, a web page opens, you download something and you run it. And it runs exactly as if you had clicked the link from one of your vendors send you a PDF with an invoice and it was something you were expecting, because really that's like 90% of the way people get in. And every major news source, FBI, every news organization, it's business email compromise. And this is the way it goes. Something comes in via email, slips by the spam filter, something's clicked, and then the games begin. And the other 9% of the attacks, it's usually that automated at the network edge, seeing what windows and doors are open. And it's kind of like the thief walking down the street, just lifting the car doors to see who left their car unlocked. It's the same deal. But instead of having to physically walk and lift the handle, you can automate it. So their methodology is really to you run through, and it's going through the way that most attackers are getting into companies: email and seeing what's unlocked on the outside. So the first thing it's hitting, because it'll usually highlight the zones that are up top, but the first big one that it hits is the big overall major risk. That when one of these ran, were they able to put something in what's called a service file path, which is effectively is the ability to put a foothold. So we partner with Huntress for trying to catch these type of things. So you can tell it wasn't one of our machines because Huntress didn't catch it. But this is where that scenario of, hey, there's an executable and file path. It's very easy to put a foothold and get access to the machine in case the machine restarts, and you can really dig deep to figure out how big of a ransom you can get. And so for these pieces here, it might be something that's totally natural from a different like security program or something, but this is what Huntress would be catching. And that when you click a lot of these links, this is where an attacker is going to try and put a foothold to be able to get back on the machine, because when you click something, you really give it permission. So there's a reason this one is first on the reports, because this is the big bad ones that they saw right off the bat. But the next big one is the analyzing accounts. And this is where stuff gets really interesting for what, when you click a link, seeing what really happens. So when you run this, when you do run through the process, this is looking at what accounts and information and passwords are easily taken off of the machine based on the settings that you have directly on the computer. So it first looks at different users with expiring passwords. So it's saying, hey, even if with this username, if this password isn't expiring, chances are I can probably get into it time and time again by making sure that, hey, I know this isn't going to change, and they might have been suspicious about that PDF this week, but they forget about it in a week or two. Thanksgiving's coming up. They have other things on their mind type deal. It also specifically looks at what are the admin users on the machine, because obviously you can do a ton of damage with an administrator machine, or rather administrator account. So this is, again, just pulling lists of users that are found on given machines based on clicking a link. So this is just quickly kind of almost like sticking your head in the company and looking around real quick, being like, yep, that guy's in charge. That person's password, it looks like that's a really old badge that they're using, so we know they don't change their ID badges. And this is kind of effectively what an attacker is doing quickly to surveil it. The other one, especially if it's clicked on multiple machines, so this is the classic scenario of, hey, I got this invoice from so-and-so, I tried to open it on my machine, and then I went to Carol's machine to try and open it, and then I went to Janine's machine to try and open it. Like, hey, it's just not opening. And now that program has run across multiple computers, that allows attackers to see if there's a way to move laterally. And if there's something with the same name on two machines, chances are they can start moving between machine to machine, and most likely has the same password across it. So then you get into this distributed local account pieces as well. This is the one that usually gets the most eyebrows when we show this to different prospects. And this is passwords that are straight up cracked or stolen right out of the machine when they click on the link. So again, these are not real users, but I know that I've sat in front of a prospect, given these to them before, and said, does your password actually start with Delta? I'm going to assume that's Delta. And then, does that look for, it's kind of a whole, is this your card magic trick, especially for, the URL that might be there as well. So these are things that are cracked by just dumping out of the browser, so you can see
Mhm.
Chrome and Chrome Edge and Firefox. But also too, if they're able to take something off of the machine, it's pretty easy to crack a password. And it gets worse. It'll detect reuse. So if you keep using your dog's name in multiple
Mhm.
places, it will also see, hey, based on what we dumped out of Chrome, we noticed you used this in a whole bunch of different places. So if you probably didn't save this password for another website that isn't saved in this one Chrome profile, we can probably reuse it somewhere else too. Huh. So again, this is just you click a link, you run one quick executable. Now, granted, when we do this, we're asking you to do it, but the
Yeah.
action is very similar to that simple business email compromise, and it's
Mhm.
just one click. Um, you also have a quick look at, are there different services? This kind of goes to that foothold piece again. That,
Mhm.
is there a service account that doesn't make a ton of sense? And also double checking back that, let's say somebody steals the dumb password, but they want to see if something is also in the dark web and for sale. So this is kind of one of the things too, mainly for educational purposes, is just saying, hey, um, we did see these credentials and these passwords for sale on the web as well, and they've been linked in a number of breaches. This is probably, yeah, admin password. That's a pretty commonly known no for a password setup.
Mm.
So for accounts, just from clicking something, this is what a credential dump looks like. And it's one of the big things that people are going for, because maybe two-factor isn't always enforceable. So this is what they go straight for. But if you use a password manager and you turn off saving passwords in those browsers, which a couple of my clients
Mhm.
have had, and some of the clients on this webinar have had, this
Mhm.
helps a lot. But also, again, this tool is good for double checking that, yes, that is in case actually set up, and I don't have users abusing this. Um, I don't have users that are trying to skirt it by like, oh, well, turns out that Firefox didn't update and it got turned back on. So you have challenges there as well. This is where stuff starts to get really interesting. So Microsoft 365, a lot of times it's probably, you run into a scenario where you turn on two-factor and you think you're good to go.
Mhm.
But to make sure that you're not constantly getting pinged to death with conditional access pieces, there's a little authentication token that's left behind, kind of like that accepting cookies thing.
Yeah.
And here's a scenario where a lot of M365 cookies were stolen, meaning that somebody could log into a 365 despite two-factor being turned on, and they got past it. The biggest thing that really kills this is conditional access, by stating that, hey, you can only log in from the appropriate IP addresses or geographic locations. Um, but and that kind of clamps down to it, and you have to find that balance between convenience and
Mm.
users not spending a quarter of their day punching two-factor codes in,
Yeah.
and being able to um, actually get their work done. So conditional access is usually the best way for stealing these, for preventing the access code stealing
Mm.
portions. um, and again, this kind of feeds to making sure that you don't have administrator accounts with those tokens hanging out on anyone's machine. An administrator account with global admin rights, it shouldn't be someone's quote daily driver. So you shouldn't have like admin at acme.onmicrosoft.com licensing apps for different people, because that token for two-factor might be stored there. User clicks a link, and now they have global admin rights to be able to see the whole tenant. It's also why, even if a VP or a chief operations officer, they should have global admin rights. It shouldn't be the one that they use for their day-to-day
Mm.
work. It should be something like admin Jane at acme.onmicrosoft.com. So that way that token is really only when they're logging in to do admin work, and it reduces that likelihood of having that damage done.
Mm.
It also goes, again, double checks against some of those, making sure that there's no duplicated and reused passwords. And then this is the one that's just forehead slappingly simple. You gotta have 2FA on an admin account. Just if you don't, just what are you doing?
Mhm.
It's table stakes these days. And again, it's one of those, make sure it's only via the web. You're not leaving it on a workstation anywhere. Um, so I like doing it in incognito mode so nothing's saved when I go to do that. So that's all the kind of peeking, what somebody's able to peek into for 365. Again, just by clicking on a link on the desktop. Again, there's no
Yeah.
admin creds running in any of these type of scans so far. So now we start moving into patches. So patches, I'm going to go pretty quickly through because they can
Mhm.
be pretty boring. But a big part is, a big reason you don't use Windows Home in a professional environment is there are different security features you want to make sure are turned on in those operating systems. The ability to do BitLocker, the ability to join to the Microsoft Intune for being able to make sure that that policy for Firefox turning off password saving is actually there for your company. That one's really important. But you also have some where, hey, there are different tools installed, and
Mhm.
that's not, you want to make sure those are limited because they can be abused. An advanced IP scanner is a pretty famous one. I know we use it and then remove it for a lot of clients for being able to see what's on a network when the
Yeah.
firewall doesn't want to tell us. But this is one where you there's some cat and mouse to patches
Mhm.
because sometimes you have a lot of laptops and patches get deployed at night and you have the laptop closed so nothing deploys. So the question is then, okay, have I missed a patching window? And it's not so bad when it's, hey, this patch is 2023 and maybe it's a quarter or two. Like, hey, it's
Mhm.
just Tuesday nights when we're doing the patch updates, your laptop's been off and we've reached out a few times and it's just not, it should be done, but it's not a
Yeah.
showstopper. It's a big question when you start seeing common vulnerability and it's 2021, because that means it's been 2 years since you've received a patch on a given machine. And that's a time to start raising the warning flag. Because patches are a business line unto themselves for making sure that that gets done. I know we have a guy, Louis, who I've mentioned before, is a back end guy. One of his jobs is just patches and just seeing if he can sneak patches in at the end of the day and trying to work that. And even as a full time employee, I'd say about half of his
Mm.
time is playing that game. So patches can be their own animal. It's good to patch as often as possible, but it's a mixed bag. If
Mhm.
every IT company in the world has missing patches, it's one of those that it's kind of a given, but it's seeing how many missed patches and how out of date are different
Mm.
machines. And the other piece too could be that Microsoft releases a security update, and it turns out that if you install it, it uninstalls the Wi-Fi driver. And what good is a secure machine if you can't connect
Yeah.
to the Wi-Fi? So then you might have some that like, hey, this machine is missing this patch. And it turns out like, yeah, we didn't install it because you'd never be able to use a printer again if we installed it. And we're waiting on Microsoft to fix their mistake. And yes, it has been 2 years. um, so I always give caution on that patch scan. And then a big part that attackers use this too is it gives them the playbook, right? This is
Yeah.
kind of like taking a quick look at the film and being like, oh, they're weak against the run, to use like a
Mhm.
football analogy. So
Yeah.
it's kind of a quick way to see, like, oh, I could use this toolkit in the future against them. Also, too, a very good thing to understand is what remote access software is detected because an antivirus won't always flag TeamViewer, GoToAssist,
Mhm.
LogMeIn as malicious. It's only if the tool is used maliciously. Like nothing's wrong with a hammer, right? Hammers
Yeah.
are very good everyday tools, but you can use a hammer maliciously. um, and it's just one of those. Maybe we don't have hammers lying out where they shouldn't be, because If somebody who is not supposed to have access to hammers gets access to them, looking at you toddlers,
Mm-hmm.
you know, not a good idea. So it's good to know what remote access software is out there. And then the last piece is just very easy to break vulnerabilities. And again, this is something that when somebody clicks a link, maybe they only see this much, but in order to be able to really take it to that next level, they use a well-known kit to be able to crack, storage space control or a .NET framework or something to really be able to take an attack to the next level. And some of them, they do really sell like vulnerability as a service. You pretty much you buy a kit to be able. It's kind of like buying a manual for how to do HR policies. We also have some for moving into antivirus here. This is usually a pretty like go, no go. Is an AV installed? Is it active? So some of this could be like, hey, we noticed that on this particular company, all these machines had, Windows Advanced Threat Protection based on the license, and then this one machine didn't. So some of it might be just making sure that threat protection is consistent across, across the board. But the big one is, as we noted earlier, for that hash dumping for password cracking, most antiviruses, and this is especially true if you go out and try and purchase your own, don't generate those alerts for a password crack attempt and when they go for that dump. That's a feature you have to turn on and make some changes in order to say, hey, we just saw this. So that's something very important to be cognizant of for different antiviruses, to make sure that because it might just be too that maybe you're innocently dumping your Chrome passwords because you're going to a password manager and you're uploading them into Okta or Keeper or LastPass or whatever. But I mean, you're going to want to know when Chrome is dumping all your passwords at once, right? Moving on into the next common protection piece, we have firewalls. This one's just noting Total, which is one of the programs we use as a mobile firewall. But it's just noting that, like, hey, this is just detected. Know that firewall is there. So that was just a good one to know. But this is one that luckily we have fixed for most of our clients. Actually, we have fixed this for all clients. If you're using remote desktop, you are using a VPN. Because if you leave one of these ports open to the outside, and this goes to that external one, is that someone can sit there, see that port, and they sit there and start to play a guessing game of, all right, I'm going to use first name and this password. And it's very easy to automate. And you effectively just keep pinging the server over and over and over again to try and figure out what username and password is suddenly going to work to be able to remote onto a desktop. And once you do that, it's very easy to do damage. An example of this is very early on in my career, we had a client that had a remote desktop server, and they had the port open to the outside. This was back before a lot of these automated tools came out. And QuickBooks, in its infinite wisdom, has to set the QuickBooks folder to be accessible by everyone, because QuickBooks, rather than as part of the server database manager, it will fail out the QuickBooks file sharing in multi-user mode unless you let it share with everyone on the server. It's something that QuickBooks still does to this day. It drives me batty, but it's also why you just have good backups. But this particular client, all of a sudden I get a phone call, hey, I can't open QuickBooks. Can you see what's wrong? I go on the server, and it turns out it's ransomed. It had been encrypted. Luckily, this client we did hourly backups for, so we quickly restored it. It only spread to that. But what we found was that the remote desktop was open to the outside, and the attacker had just guessed the password for a scanner. And all it had to do is the port just had to be open. The scanner wasn't even listed as an acceptable remote desktop user. The port was just open, and it just guessed the scanner user that a printer company had set up a long time ago and went right through. So it also kind of goes to why passwords should expire for
No.
different pieces, and making very difficult to guess passwords if you are going to use a service account like Scanner. But they didn't have to pay any type of ransom. We closed the port to the outside, implemented a VPN, and the users were none the wiser. They were back in their QuickBooks within 5 minutes.
Ooh.
There's also, hey, there's a database that's open to the outside that you can exfiltrate data from. So again, it's just seeing something open from the outside and saying, ooh, there's a server on the other side of that. I wonder what I can do with it. And then another one too is a lot of firewalls, and this is typical of, hey, I'm just going to go out and I'm just going to buy a firewall and put it in, be okay. Or, hey, I've got Comcast Secure Edge. Is that good enough for a firewall? And this is one thing that they do when clicking the link that's a great test is this ability for a simple malicious payload and passing information back and forth via HTTPS, which is that standard web stuff that we see all the time. And this one, unfortunately, is very common. A lot of firewalls do not have this portion turned on, and it's also usually a service you have to pay for, for making sure you have an annual subscription that has DPI, deep packet inspection. You also have a few additional ports, other pieces open that have different vulnerabilities. And these, again, are just this is an attacker looking at the outside and seeing what other ways are open to be able to get into the environment in some way, shape, or form. So the last piece, encryption, is looking at the information that's stored on the device. And again, this is all coming from one simple scan. And Galactic Advisors in this case is identifying IT Glue runbooks, which for us is our documentation system. It's obviously a very common system. And it's looking at a PDF that has all the IT information, and it usually has passwords in it. So, an attacker gets that. They get pretty much the whole keys to the kingdom of how the knee bone's connected to the hip bone, what software is there, everybody's name, and admin passwords. So detecting these in an unencrypted form is not good. Also, it goes for seeing that, some PII, which if they're able to grab that and take it off, which usually coupled with the firewall deep packet inspection not being there, means that, oh, cool, we saw something that was personally identifiable. Let's get that off the machine, and that's worth something right away. So, if you are an attacker, and most people don't do this, some people do it for fun, but a lot of them do it to get paid. That is a quick and instant payday, is having sensible information for someone. And then the last piece too is hard drive, and this is just looking at the different hard drives, and are they unencrypted, so that if someone is able to get physical access to them, they'd be able to get complete access to them. So it's making sure that BitLocker is turned on and encrypted for the whole disk. And then the last piece is surveillance. This is kind of a general warning. It's really the marriage of the firewall and the antivirus of, hey, just with those things, are they working in concert? Are there alerts? Usually there's a note here of when you run this, like, did your IT company get a blip that says, yo, we just saw this. Can you tell me a little bit about what's going on? And that's pretty much it for the total presentation. So that's really, in a worst case scenario, what a attacker can do by being able to click a single link and run the program. So now, kind of looking at it from a remediation standpoint, a lot of that can be really sobering. But honestly, what I have found is the best method for preventing it is one of our programs, Threat Locker, which does application whitelisting and ring fencing. When we ran this on our environment internally, we had to turn off Threat Locker in order to do it. So Threat Locker did a good job of saying, thou shalt not use PowerShell unless thou hast been blessed by the following XYZ. So that was great to see.
Yeah.
that Threat Locker had done its job from executing, but we also did this to partner to see, hey, how did the antivirus, how does Sentinel-1 on its own handle it? And it missed a couple things. It missed the password dump, but the security incident and event manager caught that. So this also kind of speaks to why you need a different stack of tools to
Yeah.
catch each of the different dimensions. But the remediation is really just making sure, at the firewall, you understand what ports are open to the outside. And if something's open to the outside, you answer the question why, and it has the appropriate security in place. Maybe it's something for the phone system, and then the phone system has its protections documented here. For password dumping, using password managers and turning off the ability to save passwords in Chrome and Firefox and Edge is super important. And you need the pro version of Windows in order to do that, because you need group policy in order to do it. And then making sure that the antiviruses and other surveillance tools you have are set up appropriately. And I'll be perfectly honest that prevention, Threat Locker still is the best tool that we have for making sure stuff doesn't run crazy. But, there are still things that you tell Threat Locker is okay. And as you saw there are ways to abuse the things that are okay. Like that first foothold one, those are all programs that are okay. They were known security programs that had appropriate escalations. And it's very easy to abuse them and make, it's kind of like when at the airport why they tell you not to grab somebody else's luggage or, be wary of luggage, is because the luggage can look innocent enough, but you have no idea that there's tons of illicit drugs or stolen cash in there, and that's not good. So, for remediation, for a lot of these, it's just good, solid practices on the endpoint, and just making sure you have that culture of security too, because you can train users and you can reduce that overall likelihood of somebody clicking the link and having something go wrong. But it still happens, because it's definitely, you have someone that you trust sends you something, you were partially expecting it, and hey, no dice. Like I had one that came through recently that was awfully convincing for a DocuSign that supposedly came from our backup vendor, and it said, oh yeah, hey, this got executed like a month and a half later, and I was like, man, how did they know? It turns out that one was legit, but that one was actually that DocuSign piece. But it would have been very easy to have had a generic like DocuSign piece to scare the crap out of me. So one thing is, here in the new year for our current clients, we'll be using this to assess your networks for, again, kind of checking our own work. And there are some options too to have these on an ongoing basis. There's a program called Client Watch, which does these scans on a reoccurring basis instead of these one-off tests.
Yeah.
And it's based on how many users you have. And it's one of those things that I send we do the initial test. Galactic Scan looks at, because humans lay their eyes on each of their scans. It's not all purely automated. And they go through, based on a certain client and their profile, what that watch program would look like. And that's something we can talk about individually if you're interested in the Client Watch program. And the other part that's nice is it also feeds into mapping compliances. So right now, a lot of Client Watch is mapped to NIST 800, which is the standard that all others are derived from. HIPAA derives from it, CMMC derives from it, PCI derives from it, because it's the government standard, for lack of a better term. And so this is something that different clients are going to be seeing going forward as we check our work, and being really taking the ethos of trust but verify and the looking out for our clients to the natural conclusion of making sure we've set stuff up the way it should be. So with that, are there any questions from the audience?
So what does it look like to get the test done? We're talking about, this is just one click and it happens. So for a business, it's just, give you a call and say, hey, we'd like to try this out. and then they send out like a bunch of emails to the list and see who clicks or something like that, or someone clicks something on purpose.
Yep. So what the tests look like is, once interest has been expressed,
Mhm.
we'll generate one of those codes. That way, all your information is mapped in one place.
Yep.
Especially since password dumps are involved, it's very important that they're siloed and that you're
Yeah.
not mixing different environments together. Um, and so, an email is sent out saying, "Hey, please click this link." It opens a quick web page to say, "Hey, click and download this." Click on the one link in that download, and then the way this works, especially because it's above board and it's a test,
Yeah.
there'll be a little window that opens with a little rocket ship
Mhm.
that is exact, which is the Galactic Advisors logo. And it
Yeah.
has these dots that move across the screen to let you know something is happening. Now,
Mhm.
obviously, attackers are not as gracious to
No.
give you a little moving graphic, but it's to kind of show you, like, will your machine actually
Mhm.
drag, and then it just kind of disappears when it's done, and then that's it. um, Usually we'll see if a machine chimes in quickly, and we'll want to run it on at least 3 machines. And while if an environment has something like threat locker, if that first wave is like awesome, threat locker did its job, excellent.
Mhm.
But in some instances, sometimes you want to leave threat locker in monitor mode
Yeah.
just to see, like, hey, just in case it's that one vulnerability, that one Adobe update process that
Mhm.
threat locker says is okay gets abused.
Yeah.
What are they able to get if threat locker doesn't do its job? That And it's one of those, like, knowing that, hey, we're gonna tie one defense system's hand behind its back. So the good news is, from a client perspective, very easy. You request it, we generate a link just for you. We send that link out, you click it, goes to download something, you run what downloaded, and it's exactly like getting that malicious PDF.
And that makes a lot of sense and is straightforward on that. And really, the solution to any of this is just having the right security environment and having people be security minded more than anything else.
Exactly. And having that an environment is exactly the right word, because it's not one thing that makes the whole thing work. It's not. I know I'm talking a lot about, like, oh yeah, just use threat lock, like,
Yeah.
oh, threat locker, but threat locker doesn't help with password reuse. Threat locker doesn't help with somebody's day-to-day account has Microsoft 365, especially that threat locker is just the endpoint, and more and more stuff is all in the web browser that people aren't really seeing. And what credentials are able to just dump and go. um, so it's definitely about an environment, understanding what's in it, and being security minded, of just trying to reduce the number of times that you're clicking the link of something that you're not supposed to.
Yeah. And then the sort of damage we're looking at that it can do is not just like, oh, they've got your machine and they have it on ransomware, but a lot of businesses, as you say, they can get into your QuickBooks, they can get to your HR department, and suddenly they're, if your HR department isn't is trying to do things easy, well, then you've got payroll information and everything on your employees, and suddenly, like, you've got your all your employees have been identity thefted or something like that.
Exactly. I mean, you have a scenario where, it might just be the ransomware is kind of the one time
Mhm.
sale, right? You
Yeah.
get your $1,000 of Bitcoin and wahoo, away you go. But like almost everything else in every other business, they're going to look for some form of recurring revenue or something they can resell. So, employee information is fantastic. Okay, I can get that employee, and from getting that employee, I can get their spouse. And oh, look at that, somebody's married to a real hot shot here. Look at that, like, let's go. Um, so it's definitely, these are the criminal organizations are businesses, and they run a lot like sales departments, of trying to figure out how different people are connected together. Because one person might just be like, yeah, all right, I'm very good at the link design. And then I sold that link design to somebody else who's actually going to send the emails out. And that guy who sends the emails out sells whatever click the link of the stuff that ran from that package script and say, hey, here's all the credentials I got. And I'll give them to you for pennies on the dollar to then sell to somebody who's going to really try and do the scam of like, hey, let's sneak something in on his Amazon and see if can't sell a few free TV shows on Amazon under this guy's account. Which somebody was telling me this morning about. They had parents that somebody was on the Amazon account buying TV shows, and it totally snuck under the radar until you go look back through and say, wait a minute, like, when did I buy The Wire? I have it on DVD. Stuff like that.
And are there, I guess, it looks like we don't have any audience questions, which is good because this was very thorough. Are there any sort of closing thoughts or like actions that we want to talk about?
I would say in closing thoughts is for current clients, we'll be reaching out about doing these in the near future for being able to really test and see how stuff is set up. A big part too is for some of the ones that were tough to remediate, I wanted to make sure that we had a good process in place for being able to fix it without breaking clients' environments. Like Google Chrome, turning off safe passwords in Chrome can cause a lot of gnashing of teeth. Some clients are already really good about having password managers, and some are not. So that was kind of the last piece we had to solve, and we found an affordable one on the lower end. I know some of my clients use very robust solutions like Okta, but Okta is not for everyone. It's very enterprise grade, so I found a good small business one for people who are, hey, just a handful of people are going to use it type deal. So I solved that, and on we go. So for those who are interested, definitely reach out for booking a scan. For those who are not current clients, and then for those who are, fear not, coming soon.
All right. Well, thanks so much, Will. And thank you so much, everyone else, for stopping by. I hope you have a great day, and look forward to more in the future, and look forward to those emails about getting your scan.
Awesome. Have a great day, everyone.